Amandla. Amandla. Viva UDWOSA, viva. Viva UDWOSA Pretoria, viva. Viva UDWOSA Val, viva. Viva comrades, viva. Sis Yvonne, could it be isilungu okanye isiNdebele? Oh, I have to accommodate nabanye. Yes. Somewhere la khona la kuthi a journey to corridor wasn't easy. The journey to corridor wasn't easy. It is a sad and sorrowful journey. We are celebrating Human Rights Day here in South Africa. Internationally, we are celebrating International Women's Day, which was on the 8th of March. Are domestic workers celebrating? It's a difficult question to answer. When I started with the case of Maria Mahlangu, I want to take you back to the history of why I started with the case of Maria Mahlangu. I remember I was traveling in a taxi. I saw somebody having a newspaper, and in that newspaper, there was an article about a domestic worker, Agnes Mngadi. I'm good in memories, Agnes Mngadi, and that was many years ago. Agnes Mngadi was a domestic worker somewhere in Durban. She got a new employment today. The following day, she was working for policemen. The following day, when she went to work, to her new work, she was beaten by dogs. Agnes was unconscious for 3 days at the hospital. Upon regaining consciousness, she got a heart attack. When she saw all the injuries that she suffered, she passed away. And then after some years, then I saw another article, and I have a copy of it. I don't know how I forgot to bring it, Sis Yvonne. It's about Christina Moyo. Christina Moyo was a domestic worker from Alexander here in Randburg. She was looking after the house of her employers, after the insured house of her employers, but her life was not insured. On the 29th of December, they broke into that house. She was with her 4-year-old daughter, Tindi Lerato Moyo. They raped Christina in front of Tindi. They slit her throat in front of that little girl. And the employers returned back home on the 1st of January, on New Year's Day. They found the poor girl sitting next to her decomposing body of her mother. They called the police. When the police asked Nana what happened, she said, "My mother won't wake up." That pierced my heart. The government that is not responding to everything that is happening to domestic workers, they said nothing about the case of Christina Moyo. It was on newspaper. It's obviously somebody has seen it. They have heard about it, but they don't care because it's a domestic worker who died there. What was even worse is what the employer offered the family for a funeral. 3 cabbages. 3 cabbages for a funeral of a domestic worker who was looking after the house that is insured and the furniture that was insured, but her life was not insured, and her life was not valued up to death. That's why, Sis Yvonne, when I read an article on Pretoria News in April, it was early April in 2012, there was a short article about a domestic worker who drowned in Ferry Glen. I asked domestic workers, unfortunately, Sis Lady was supposed to be here. She's the one who found those employers in Ferry Glen. I asked the members that there's a domestic worker who drowned in Ferry Glen. Can you please try to ask them who are working in Ferry Glen? They are very reliable. They came back, they said, yes, we have found the family where she was working. And they say the ladies from Mashiding. Then I said, those who are from Mashiding, please try to find the Mahlangu family. On the next meeting, they came back, they said, yes, we have found the family of Mahlangu. I remember it was on the 24th August. We didn't have an office. We were holding our meeting at Pretoria Church Square, next to that stage of Paul Kruger. The family of Maria Mahlangu came to that meeting. After hearing what they were saying, and then I asked the contacts of the employer, I called the employers and I asked the employers that, I'm asking for a meeting on the 24th of September, Heritage Day, because I was working and I could only use the public holiday. They said, okay, you can come, because they knew that this is not something small. They allowed me to have that meeting with them on the 24th September 2012. I was with Mahlangu's daughter, his sister, and her brother. When we got there, I asked them, how long has Maria worked for them? They said she worked for 22 years. And I said, how long did you have this swimming pool? They said, for 10 years. I said, not once did it ever cross your mind to teach her how to swim? Maybe if you taught her how to swim, maybe she would have swum out, I don't know. And then the madam, Mrs. de Klerk, I'll never forget, she said she was so careless and so insensitive. I didn't know that Maria was so scared of water until she died. I think Maria blacked out and fell into the pool because she had AIDS. I didn't know her HIV status, and her daughter started weeping next to me. Sylvia was crying. I said to the madam, you know what? I don't know about the HIV status of Maria Mahlangu, and I'm not concerned about it. What I know is that Maria Mahlangu was working in your house, and she died in your property. If Maria was sick with AIDS, as we are saying, she should have been home. She should have been detected by the doctor. She was not going to die in your property. That's when I said to Bongi, I'm starting a journey to fight for justice for your mother, for domestic workers. And I don't know how long it will take me, maybe some years, or maybe at the end of my life, but one day we'll have the date of your mother in court. That's where I started. And along the journey, I started in Pretoria Equality Court. I didn't know much about the law, but I knew that domestic workers were discriminated. That's why I started at the Equality Court, and I was opening the case against the government and the employer. The first respondent was the government for excluding domestic workers in Korea, because I knew that the domestic workers were excluded, and also the employer. I was not well received there. I went to magistrate court. They didn't hear what I was saying. Unfortunately, black people didn't understand me and speaking their own languages, because it's a matter of a domestic worker. Then I went to UDWOSA. Hey. That attorney was so angry with me. She was so defiant. I could tell, oh, she's an employer herself. She was very cross. She said this was not the employer's fault that she fell into a swimming pool. I said, yes, it was not the employer's fault, but it was the employer's responsibility for safety of Maria was in her employer's hands, in her property. And then the next 2 weeks after, I received a letter from UDWOSA saying that they are not going to assist us with the case. Yeah, University of South Africa. Turned us down. We went to Pretoria, University of Pretoria. When we got there, the lady was at the reception, said to me, you can write that story of yours, just a little bit of it, and leave your numbers, we'll call you. And I said to Sylvia, they will never call me, and they never called me. They never called me. It's been a struggle of up and downs with Sylvia to Wits University, different institutions, until in 2016 where we met Seri. That's when the case was started, Seri prepared it for court until it reached court. In 2019, we went to Pretoria High Court in May and in October. In 2020, we went to Constitutional Court on the 10th of March, and the history was made on the 19th of November 2020, where the Constitutional Court ordered the Minister of Labour to include domestic workers in COIDA. The history was made, definitely. But is it working for domestic workers? Is it going to work for domestic workers? The Constitutional Court ruling applied retrospectively from 27 April 1994 up to today. But the government is saying to us, this is the COIDA that the Constitutional Court gave it to you, but we're going to make it very hard and difficult for you to benefit from it. They say those who were injured and those who were killed on duty, some of the employers have also passed away themselves. They say employers are policy holders. Employers must complete the forms before a worker can be compensated by the Department of Labor. If the employer has died in 2016, and then that means the domestic worker is not going to be compensated. So they are making it very difficult. Some employers have relocated. In one of our meetings, I asked the Department of Labor, I said, there's this domestic worker, she was all over the newspapers. They broke into the house. They shot the employer and shot at the domestic worker. Unfortunately, Mariam Caesar died there. The employer was airlifted. He was in ICU. Then, after that, he was discharged. He left the country. He was not a South African. Said every evidence, it shows that Maria was killed on duty. She died on duty. And you say the employer must complete the forms. The employer has left the country. What are you saying to the family as a department? Are domestic workers going to benefit from compensation fund? You have to fight. If you think that the war is over, this is the time to fight like never before. As we speak, domestic workers are beaten by dogs. It's very sad. It's very sad. I'll also speak about the case of Mama Kabonina Mukonza. A domestic worker was beaten at work by her employer's racist son. The son that she took care of when he was 5 years, Henrico Muller. She brought him up during lockdown. He was irritated by the president addressing the nation, the alcohol restrictions. Everybody was frustrated. I was frustrated. I was scared. You were scared. We didn't know what was happening. But for somebody to take out an anger to an elderly 63-year-old domestic worker was something else. He was showing his true colors. And he beat Mama Mkonza up because he said he was tired of the black government. Jacob Zuma ate money with the Guptas. Julius Malema collapsed the VPS Bank. And Ramaphosa and Parliament, they are eating money. What is that has to do with a domestic worker? Who's cleaning the house, who's sleeping on the floor, looking after the grandmother of that Henrico, who couldn't wash herself. She was changing her nappies, sleeping on the bed. Mama Mkonza was sleeping on the floor in their house. That's why Enrico had so much power to go and beat her up, because she was right there in their house. And what happened? Domestic workers have failed even by the system. We attended the case of Mama Mkonza from 2020. She was beaten in August 2020. From 2020 until 2022, where the magistrate, the so-called magistrate Herman, in Springs Magistrate Court, said in his ruling, when Mama Mkonza left the hospital, the doctor has testified that she was clean, there was no blood on her face. So the magistrate says he doesn't know what Mama Mkonza did to manipulate that blood that was covered on her face, because there were pictures of Mama Mkonza with blood. The magistrate is saying that in the court, Mama Mkonza, a 63-year-old, manipulated her face to bleed. So he gave, in his sentencing, Mr. Miller, the father, who broke Mama Mkonza's phone against the wall, he said it was a cheap phone. That's what the magistrate said. He said it was a cheap phone, and then his case was dismissed. Leslie Muller's case was dismissed. And then Henrico got 3 months in jail, or 90 days in jail, or 3,000 rand fine. Can a white racist go to jail for a domestic worker? Definitely not. They will pay 3,000 rand. It's nothing to them. Plus the father is a doctor. It's nothing to them. They paid that 3,000 rand, and the case it's just like that, because it's a case of a domestic worker. It's not over. We have taken it to equality court. It's going to equality court as we speak. Yes, we've got the lawyers. But it's so difficult to get lawyers. I hope somebody sitting here today can hear the domestic workers' cries. It's very difficult to get lawyers. Domestic workers, as I'm talking, they are beaten by dogs, by pit bulls. Others are killed. As I'm standing here, I've got 6 cases, 3 deaths, and 3 domestic workers who are disfigured, and all of that. As I've said, that we are writing and speaking to a government that is not responding. On the 5th of August last year, all of us here and other comrades, we marched to the Union Building to hand over a memorandum to the President of the Republic of South Africa, talking about the pit bulls. Actually, our message was clear. We're saying those employers who want to have pit bulls must keep them far away from the properties where they are domestic workers. They can even go and I don't know, buy a plot or whatever, and just keep them far away from domestic workers, because the domestic workers at the end of the day are at the receiving point end of those pit bulls. Selina Dipuo Kokolosi here doesn't have a nose, doesn't have ears, doesn't have an upper lip. She was beaten by 3 pit bulls. During that attack on the 25th of January in 2022, a neighbor, she was saved by the neighbor, who jumped the wall and shot at the dogs. The employers opened a case against that neighbor, that the neighbor killed their dogs. While the domestic worker is fighting for her life in ICU, she was transferred from Potchefstroom to Chris Hani Baragwanath. She was in a coma for 3 months, not 3 days, for 3 months. She said the day she regained her consciousness, she started to scream. She was screaming there. The nurses ran to her, the doctor, they explained to her that you've been here, you were brought here by paramedics because you were beaten by dogs at work. Then she said she started to remember because she didn't know what was happening there. She fainted there during that time the dogs attacked her. What is said is that the employers, even this Tuesday we are going to a court in the 26th March, I'm going to Potchefstroom to attend a court. The employers are bringing 3 lawyers. Yeah, 3 lawyers at the court. Yet the domestic worker was not paid his salary. Those dogs attacked her on a payday on the 25th of January, and she was getting 1,300 underpaid. 1,300, she hasn't received that money until today. But they have a guts to bring 3 lawyers in court, because that's how people take domestic workers and how people undervalue the lives of domestic workers. They said that woman employer, when they told her that Selina has regained consciousness, they said she cried, she stopped the car she was driving. She cried and said, Selina is awake and my dogs are dead. She was crying that her dogs were killed by SPCA and Selina is awake now. That means Selina was supposed to die with the dogs. This year I took that case to a constructive dismissal case to CCMA because the lawyer, she was approached by many lawyers. Others are just lying, raising hope of a domestic worker, then they dump her. They left her hanging. So I took a case to CCMA, constructive dismissal. Then the CCMA, it's 1 year, 11 months late because I took it on the 9th of January while she was 9 January 2024, she was beaten on the 25th January 2022. So it was 11 months and few weeks. So the CCMA accepted the case. Then the employers, they sent 15 documents opposing condonation by CCMA. They are so shameless. They are even opposing condonation. After sending 15 those documents, we went to CCMA, to Klerksdorp CCMA, to hear if we are granted condonation or what. They were against it. They said they are still going to file more documents. They sent 10 more, 25 documents, just to make sure that a domestic worker who was beaten by pit bulls in the house while washing dishes in the kitchen doesn't get anything. A black woman must go empty-handed and naked. That's what they want to see happening. Because this is not about race, but it is there. Domestic workers in South Africa are black women from poor background. Others are not educated. Others, they are educated, but because of lack of jobs, they opt to do domestic work. That's what is happening. So those employers, they are thinking that all domestic workers are so poor that they can do everything that they want to do with them, that they can treat domestic workers any way they want to treat them. They forget that before they are domestic workers, they are mothers, they are parents, they leave homes behind. So Mama Selina Kokolosi, she's left with a disfigured face, and the lawyer sent some documents from other lawyers. I don't want to mention them because I'm angry with them, who approached the employers in 2022, then they left the case just hanging. Can you please find us some good lawyers, an attorney and an advocate, those who can take all these employers to court, sue them, whatever that they sue them, and take their 25%. I'm pleading with them, not for free, because they don't want to do anything for domestic workers, because domestic workers are underpaid, they don't have money. If we can just have that, lawyers who can have Mason domestic workers, and at the end of the day, and take whatever that they take, their percentage, just for domestic workers to get justice in South Africa. The Labour Department, if we take the cases of dog bites to the Department of Labour, is another waste of time. Maria Mahlangu, I want to say it, and I can even say it on an international platform. Maria Mahlangu, who worked for 22 years for her employers, who was earning 2,500 rand a month, the Department of Labor compensated her daughter with 48,870. That's the life of a domestic worker in South Africa, this government. 48,870. So if we take cases of those who lost their noses, their ears, and their mouths, the government's going to give them 18,000, I think. They say she's still alive. That's why we need lawyers. We have to make example. I'm telling you, if we can fight these employers who are so cruel to domestic workers, they will change. We will make change. And it is upon you, domestic workers, also to stand up for yourselves. On the 1st of March, as we start the Human Rights Month, a domestic worker, a 65-year-old Trifina Mgomezulu, who was working at the school according to her son. On Friday, if the domestic worker is going home for a long weekend, she's asked by employers to start working for them from Friday, Saturday, Sunday. She went to work in Secunda in Mpumalanga on a Friday. On Saturday, they couldn't get hold of her. On Sunday, they couldn't get hold of her, the children. They said they were thinking that on Monday morning they are going to go and look for her, because usually when she's working over the weekend, on Sunday afternoon she's coming back home, she sleeps at home, and then the next morning she's going back to the school of the same employers. So on Monday they got a call from the police that Trifina Mgomezulu was eaten by dogs. She's dead. The son says they know our home. They brought some stuff for my mother. They brought her on the back. They know our home. But they say that Trifina was beaten by those dogs on Saturday afternoon at around 5 p.m. But they didn't bother to go and tell their children that your mother has died. They didn't bother to do anything. They only have a conversation with the police. And you must remember, if you don't know, Secunda, those sides of Secunda, Petale, there are lots of white racist people. I grew up from there, I know. I'm from Kriel. I was brought up by my grandparents in Kriel. I know that whiteness is happening that side. So when the family went to the police station on Monday, the white policewoman said to them, there's nothing you can do about this case, because there's a footage where your mother is beating the dogs with a hose pipe. They are defending the dogs while a woman has lost her life, a breadwinner, a 65-year-old woman who was working for a family. She lost her life, and they're speaking so nicely about those dogs. They say they are good dogs. I even read an article, they question a dog trainer or whatever, an expert. They are saying nothing about Trifina. She worked for 14 years there. During her funeral, they gave her, the family, 4,000 rand, and they said 1,000 is for her grandchildren in this sector. Mlungi Sinkejisi, here in Boksburg, in Benoni Crystal Park, was eaten by dogs alive until he died. The neighbor took a video of him. I still praise that neighbor of Selina Kokolos, who jumped the wall to save a woman who was screaming in the kitchen from the dogs. The Mlungi Sikejis was not so lucky. When Selina Kokolosi told me that, she thinks of drinking poison because she looks like a dog. I told her the story of Mlungi Sinkejisa. I said, God has a purpose for your life. If God wanted you dead, you should have died. That time the dogs were busy with you. You even lost consciousness. You don't know what happened after that, because you said you screamed until your voice was not coming out. The next thing you were in Baragwana. You don't know what was the date or when was the day. I said Mlungi Sinkejisi ran in that property. It is Palisade. We went to protest there with many comrades here. It's Palisade. They could look at her. People were looking at him running around. The front opposite woman said she called the police, she called an ambulance. They all arrived after he died. He said he was screaming, kicking, and doing everything until he fell down, and the dogs, they finished him. The neighbor took a video, because to that neighbor, a black life doesn't matter. To him, it was a circus. He was enjoying it. I've got that video of about 14, 16 seconds, and it's graphic. Instead of taking his gun and save a life, he killed. He didn't. He preferred that the dogs must kill him, because he's a gardener. He was doing gardening there. So as I'm saying that, I'm pleading with somebody here, maybe somebody can have somebody who can help domestic workers while they help themselves along the road. Because if they take on these cases, it's not going to be one case. There are still going to be more. So it's going to be a project, a lifetime project to work with all domestic workers' cases, even retrospectively for that lawyer. It will be something that is going on and on, because there are still going to come out some domestic workers who were beaten by dogs. There are others that the dogs were set on them purposely by employers. I had a domestic worker, a gardener, who said the employer set the dogs on him. So there are still many cases. To change this, really, as domestic workers, I've told you even on our way here, I said you are on your own. Don't think that 30 years of democracy has make it a difference that much for you. Because if it had, these dog bites and all these cases, it wouldn't have been happening like this. Every year we hear about a domestic worker is killed or is crippled or is beaten by employers, or this is happening. It's because the justice system in South Africa is too lenient. On the 16th of June, it's Youth Day here in South Africa. It's International Domestic Workers Day. We are going to Secunda. We are going to go to that house where Mama Trifina Mgomezulu was beaten by dogs, where the employers are saying was beaten by dogs, because nobody know if it's true. We don't know that it's true. They said there was a footage, then the footage is no longer there. There was load shedding. So we don't know what's happening there. We are going to Secunda. We're going to start at the employer's house. From there, we are going to the police station. We are going there as domestic workers. They can make another history, as they did by shooting the young people in Soweto in 1976, 16 June. This time they can make another history and show that domestic workers will be protesting against everything that is happening in this sector. More especially because nobody is defending the rights of domestic workers. We are going to defend the rights of domestic workers in any way that we can, in any possible way that we can, while we are still praying for the lawyers to assist us. I thank you.